The storm had taken everything: his wife, his hope, and nearly his will to breathe. Jack Morrison sat slumped against the barn wall, his calloused hands trembling as he held his 3-month-old daughter against his chest. Little Emma's cries had weakened to desperate whimpers, each sound a knife through his heart. She needed milk. She needed her mother. She needed things he couldn't give her, and the realization was crushing him from the inside out. 3 days had passed since Sarah's funeral. 3 days since he'd laid his beautiful wife in the cold Montana earth while their baby screamed for her in his arms. 3 days since he'd felt anything but the suffocating weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. The ranch that had been their dream now felt like a prison, every corner haunted by her laughter, her touch, her promises that they'd build something beautiful together. Jack had tried everything. The formula made Emma sick, violently rejecting what her tiny body desperately needed. The nearest town was 40 miles away, the roads still washed out from the spring floods that had delayed the ambulance, that had stolen those precious minutes that might have saved Sarah. His truck had given out yesterday, and his phone had no signal this far into the valley. He was alone, completely and utterly alone, with a dying baby and no way to save her. The sun was setting when he heard it, the sound of tires on gravel. Jack's head snapped up, hope and fear warring in his chest. Nobody came out here. Nobody even knew to come. He stumbled to his feet, Emma limp in his arms, and made his way to the front of the house just as an old pickup truck came to a stop in his driveway. The woman who stepped out was somewhere in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that held the kind of sadness that comes from knowing loss intimately. She wore jeans and a faded flannel shirt, and she looked at Jack with an expression that made his throat tighten, like she could see straight through to his breaking heart. "I'm Margaret Chen," she said simply, her voice steady and warm. "I heard about your wife. I'm so sorry." Jack couldn't speak. He could only hold Emma tighter as tears he'd been holding back finally spilled over. Margaret's eyes moved to the baby, and something shifted in her expression. "How old?" "3 months," Jack managed to choke out. "She won't take formula. She needs a." His voice broke. "I don't know what to do." Without hesitation, Margaret stepped forward. "May I?" she asked, holding out her arms. Every instinct screamed at Jack to hold on, to not let this stranger take the last piece of Sarah he had left. But Emma was dying, and he was out of options. With shaking hands, he passed his daughter to Margaret. The older woman cradled Emma with practiced ease, her hand immediately going to the baby's forehead, checking her temperature, examining her with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. "She's dehydrated," Margaret said, her voice tight with concern. "How long has she been like this?" "Since yesterday morning. She stopped crying a few hours ago. I tried everything, but nothing works, and I can't get to town, and SHH. Margaret interrupted gently. "I understand. More than you know." She looked up at him, and there was something fierce in her eyes. "I lost my husband 6 months ago. Cancer. We never had children of our own. But I was a nurse for 30 years. Pediatric ward." She paused, her next words careful, deliberate. "I know a woman in the valley. She had a baby 2 months ago. She's been looking for a way to help, struggling with oversupply. I can call her, but we need to get fluids in this little one right now." Jack felt like he'd been struck by lightning. "You can help her? Let me try." Margaret was already moving toward the house. "Do you have sugar, salt, clean water?" The next hour passed in a blur. Margaret worked with calm efficiency, preparing an emergency rehydration solution and getting Emma to take it drop by drop with a clean dropper. She called her friend from Jack's landline. He'd forgotten he even had it connected, and within 40 minutes, a young woman named Rebecca arrived with her infant son and bags full of expressed milk. "My freezer's full," Rebecca said, tears in her own eyes as she looked at Emma. "I've been praying for a way to help someone. This feels like an answer." As Emma finally began to feed, her color returning and her tiny fists unclenching, Jack sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. He'd been so close to losing her, so close to failing Sarah completely. Margaret sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You didn't fail," she said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "You're here. You're fighting for her. That's not failure." "I couldn't save Sarah," Jack whispered. "The roads were flooded. The ambulance took too long. She was bleeding, and I couldn't. I know," Margaret said, and the weight of her understanding nearly broke him. "I watched my husband slip away over months. I held his hand through every treatment, every setback, every moment of hope that turned to ash. And at the end, when he looked at me and said he was tired, I couldn't save him either. All I could do was be there. All I could do was love him through it." Jack looked up at her, this stranger who'd appeared like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known how to form. "Why did you come?" Margaret's smile was sad but genuine. "Because someone came for me when I needed it most. After Thomas died, I thought I'd die too. Just stopped breathing from the weight of it. But people in this valley, they showed up. They brought food. They sat with me. They reminded me that life keeps going even when you think it can't." She glanced at Emma, now contentedly nursing in Rebecca's arms. "I've been lost these past 6 months. No purpose, no direction. Just existing in a house full of memories. When I heard about you, about what happened, something inside me woke up. Maybe it was Thomas, pushing me to do something. Maybe it was just the universe. But I had to come." Over the following weeks, Margaret kept coming. Every day, she'd arrive in her old truck with supplies, wisdom, and steady hands. She taught Jack how to care for Emma, the right way to burp her, how to read her cries, when to worry and when to breathe. Rebecca continued to provide milk, refusing any payment, saying only that motherhood was meant to be shared. But Margaret did more than help with the baby. She helped Jack grieve. On the nights when the silence threatened to swallow him whole, she'd sit on his porch and let him talk about Sarah, the way she'd laugh at his terrible jokes, how she'd dance in the kitchen while cooking, her dreams for the ranch and their family. Margaret never tried to fix his pain or rush his healing. She just listened, and sometimes she'd share stories about Thomas, and they'd grieve together, two broken people finding strength in shared understanding. One evening, as summer painted the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink, Jack found Margaret in the nursery they'd prepared before Emma was born. She was painting the walls a soft yellow, humming quietly to herself while Emma slept in her crib. "You don't have to do this," Jack said from the doorway. Margaret turned, paintbrush in hand, and smiled. "I know, but I want to. This little girl deserves a beautiful room, and you deserve to not have to do everything alone." Jack leaned against the doorframe, watching this woman who'd become essential to his survival. "I can't pay you enough for everything you've done here." "I don't want payment," Margaret interrupted firmly. "Do you know what you've given me, Jack? A reason to get up in the morning. A purpose. These past months with you and Emma, I felt alive again. Needed. Thomas and I always wanted children, but it never happened for us. And now her voice caught. Now I get to be part of this little miracle's life. That's more valuable than anything you could pay me." Something shifted in Jack's chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in months. "You're not just part of her life," he said quietly. "You saved it. You saved both of us." As autumn arrived and Emma grew stronger, the three of them settled into a rhythm that felt almost like family. Margaret had essentially moved into the guest room, claiming the roads were too dangerous at night and she might as well stay. Jack had stopped protesting, secretly grateful for her presence, for the sound of another adult in the house, for the way she made coffee in the morning and hummed while she worked. The ranch began to thrive again too. Margaret had a head for business that complemented Jack's skill with the land and animals. Together, they expanded the operation, bringing in rescue horses that Margaret would gentle with patient hands while Jack worked with the cattle. Emma would watch from her playpen, gurgling happily at the animals and the two adults who orbited around her with devotion. It was Rebecca who finally said what everyone in the valley was thinking. She'd stopped by one Saturday afternoon and found Jack and Margaret working together to fix the fence while Emma napped in a carrier on Margaret's back. "You two look like you've been doing this for years," Rebecca observed, a knowing smile on her face. Jack and Margaret exchanged a glance, and Jack felt heat creep up his neck. "Margaret's been a godsend," he said carefully. Rebecca's smile widened. "Thomas would be happy, you know that you found each other. After Rebecca left, Margaret was quiet for a long time. Finally, as they finished the last fence post, she spoke. Do you ever feel guilty for being happy again? Jack considered the question, looking out over the land he'd built with Sarah, now being rebuilt with Margaret. Every day, he admitted, I loved Sarah with everything I had. Losing her almost destroyed me. But, Margaret prompted gently, but she wouldn't want Emma to grow up with a broken father. She wouldn't want me to stop living. He turned to Margaret, really looking at her, this strong, kind woman who'd walked into his disaster and somehow made it beautiful again. And I don't think Thomas would want you to stop living either. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I've been so scared, she whispered. Scared that feeling happy again means forgetting them, means dishonoring what we had. Jack reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling both natural and terrifying. I think it means honoring them by choosing to keep going, by choosing to love again, even when it's scary. Emma woke up then, making the small sounds that meant she was ready for attention. Margaret lifted her from the carrier, and the baby immediately reached for Jack with a delighted squeal. As he took his daughter, his hand brushed Margaret's, and neither of them pulled away. The first snow came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white silence. Jack stood at the window, Emma on his hip, watching Margaret clear the porch. She'd insisted on staying through the winter, claiming she was too old to be driving in snow. He'd agreed without argument, unable to imagine the house without her anymore. That night, after Emma was asleep, they sat by the fire with coffee. The comfortable silence between them had become one of Jack's favorite things, of the way they could just be together without needing to fill the space with words. I've been thinking, Margaret said finally, about what comes next. Jack's heart clenched. Are you leaving? What number? Margaret looked genuinely surprised. Unless you want me to? No, Jack said quickly, perhaps too quickly. I don't want you to leave, ever. Margaret's expression softened. Good, because I've been thinking about making this permanent. About her, she paused, gathering courage. About being a family, the three of us. If you want that. Jack set down his coffee and moved to sit beside her. I loved Sarah, he said, needing her to understand. I will always love her. She was my first love, the mother of my child. I know, Margaret said, and there was no jealousy in her voice, only understanding. But you, Jack continued, taking her hands in his, you taught me that the heart doesn't run out of room, that loving again doesn't diminish what came before. You saved Emma's life. You saved my life. And somewhere along the way, without me even realizing it was happening, I fell in love with you. Tears streamed down Margaret's face. Thomas was my whole world for 30 years. Losing him felt like losing myself. But with you and Emma, I found a new self. One that still honors who I was but embraces who I can be. I love you, Jack Morrison. I love you and that beautiful baby girl, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making this family whole. They married in the spring, in the small church where Jack had said goodbye to Sarah and where Margaret had bid farewell to Thomas. There was no betrayal in it, only gratitude for second chances, for unexpected grace, for the way life can surprise you with beauty even in the midst of loss. Emma took her first steps the day after the wedding, tottering between Jack and Margaret with determined joy. And as they celebrated, neither of them could help but feel that somewhere, somehow, Sarah and Thomas were celebrating too, two souls who'd loved completely, now at peace knowing the people they'd left behind had found each other. The ranch flourished over the years. Emma grew up strong and kind, with her mother's laugh and a fierce love for the land. She called Margaret Mama Margaret and learned both their stories about the brave woman who'd given her life and the brave woman who'd saved it. On quiet evenings, Jack and Margaret would sit on the porch and watch the sunset paint the Montana sky. They'd talk about the journey that brought them together, about the grief that could have destroyed them but instead transformed them into something stronger. Love, they learned, isn't a finite resource. Hearts broken open have more room, not less. And sometimes the greatest act of honoring those we've lost is choosing to truly live again, to open ourselves to new love, new purpose, new life. even when it terrifies us. In the end, Jack hadn't just survived his darkest moment. He'd found something he never expected: a family forged not by blood alone but by choice, by sacrifice, by the simple act of showing up when someone needs you most. And that, he realized, was the most beautiful kind of love there was.